So a very, very warm welcome to you all this morning. My name is Neil Hudson-Basing. I'm the Corporate Events Manager for LSBU. Delighted to have worked with colleagues from LSBU and beyond, some of whom you'll see on screen right now, and you'll be meeting them over the course of this morning. Welcome to Changing the World, one project at a time, another project management event being delivered by LSBU's Business School. Before we get started, I'd just like to take you through some virtual housekeeping, including Zoom functionality, but to start with, I'll just read a short statement on respect and dignity. Everyone attending or speaking at an LSBU event, whether in person or virtually, should be treated with respect, dignity and courtesy. LSBU operates an environment built on equality, inclusion and acceptance. We value contributions, feedback and comments, and wish to create a space for sharing, learning, celebrating and bringing communities together. LSBU does not tolerate any form of bullying, abuse, harassment or discrimination. Please keep the conversation kind and respectful. We reserve the right to remove anyone that isn't. We want our events to be an enjoyable, safe and warm experience for all. Thank you for adhering to these guidelines. Just to take you through the Zoom functionality, we are in Zoom webinar, which means that we cannot hear you or see you, but you can communicate with us through a variety of ways. Firstly, there's the chat box, and it's great to see people making use of that already. In this virtual world, it's lovely to know who our audience are. Please use that to share your introductions. So let us know who you are, what you do, and where you're joining us from, and share your thoughts and comments as well in there. It's also great to see your thoughts and comments on Twitter as well, and we'll put our hashtag and our handle in the chat box shortly. You can also use the Q&A box, and I'd like to ask you to reserve any questions specifically for the Q&A box, just so that we don't lose them in the chat box. So if you have any of the questions for our speakers today, pop them in the Q&A box. You can also upvote on the questions you most want to see answered, which boosts them to the top, and you can comment on other people's questions as well, and we'll refer back to those throughout the event. Please take time to familiarize yourself with the program. We've popped some of our speakers' bios in there as well, and I'll pop that in the chat box shortly. And finally, take comfort breaks as and when you need to. We do have some scheduled, but in this environment, you're free to pop off whenever you need to. And feel free to come back as well if you do need to nip off and take a call. I'm in the background if you have any questions at all, so feel free to ping them over to me. I'd now like to hand over to my colleague, Sarah. Oh, you're on mute there, Sarah.
Sorry about that. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Great. Okay. Good morning and a very warm welcome to all the attendees, wherever in the world you're from. Academics, project practitioners and students. We're very delighted to be hosting you today for a very interesting event on sustainability in the world of projects and through projects. This is the third project management conference we're running at the London South Bank Business School, and we're proud that the themes of each conference has been fed by our audience in the previous conference. And today we will be discussing a very important topic in the project profession and beyond, which is so timely given that COP26 is happening. It's the final day of COP26 in Glasgow today, actually. So I'm sure we all agree that project-based industries are among the largest industries in the global economy, including construction, aerospace, motion pictures, pharmaceutical, healthcare, financial services and IT. So organizations are now more than before moving towards becoming projectified and using projects to move towards greater efficiency and productivity, which is pushed by increased globalization, competitiveness and complexity. So these types of organizations, project-based organizations, have become so important in the past 2 decades that some researchers, as mentioned, discuss the projectification of society. Currently, project work in advanced economies counts for roughly 1/3 of all business activities and about 22% of the world's GDP. So given that so much resource is actually being invested into projects and project work, it is now ever more important for the profession to adopt an approach which balances the environmental, social, and economic aspects of project-based working to meet the current needs of stakeholders without compromising or overburdening future generations. And this is defined as sustainability in the project profession. Sustainability is relevant across all areas of project-based working. It involves balancing different concerns, environment, such as climate change, society, such as community, economy, such as affordability and risk management, and administration, such as health and safety. This model is taken from the Association of Project Management Body of Knowledge, 7th edition. So all professional bodies are actually embedding this element into the project bodies of knowledge as well, more than before actually. So obviously it is only when these 4 elements are considered that we can build sustainability into projects. And obviously as project managers, it is our role to make decisions and take actions based on the best interest of society, public safety, and the environment. So now before I introduce our excellent speakers who are lined up today, both academics and practitioners who will share with us their insightful views on sustainability in the project profession, I would invite you to answer some questions. If Neil can kindly share the poll. So first of all, we would obviously like to know which industry you belong to. I know lots of us are probably from the education industry, which is not a project-based industry, but most of us would be working with the project discipline. Some other questions: which elements of sustainability, in your opinion, do you think needs the most attention in your sector? Just a little bit of a quiz, what you think, some facts, and if you think they're true or false, mainly regarding environmental sustainability. And also when it comes to projects, where do you think the responsibility lies for ensuring that sustainability is built into project practices? It would be very interesting to know the opinion of the project professionals joining us today. So obviously we'll give you a few minutes to go through this, and we can go through the answers as well. But maybe while we're waiting for you to answer, I'm just going to introduce our speakers today. Here is the plan today. So we start with a keynote by Professor Simon Philbin. Simon is Director of Engineering and Enterprise at London South Bank University, and he'll be speaking about measuring sustainability impact for infrastructure projects from the construction industry. We will then have Professor John Abohan from the School of Built Environment and Architecture speaking about the role of project managers as bastions of sustainable construction. Dr. Lucas Sabini is joining us today from Hertfordshire, University of Hertfordshire, and he will be speaking about his research, his long time research on project sustainability, the paradoxical profession, sustainability and project management. We will have Merv Vyaf from Project Management Institute London chapter, and he will be speaking about a very interesting initiative by the Project Management Institute, transforming the net zero landscape, inspiring and equipping project management professionals and change makers for 10 times impact. And last but not least, we will have Steve Tufts from Creative PM speaking about overcoming barriers to integrating sustainability into project management practices. So before I hand over to Simon, maybe we can quickly go through the poll results. Neil, if you can kindly share that.
Sure.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes, we have lots of 42% from education sector, as expected, construction, IT, financial services, and other industries, 25% from other industries. Would be interesting if you would like to put in the chat box which sector you belong to. So which element of sustainability needs the most attention in your sector? We've got both environmental sustainability and economic sustainability highest ranked. 8% have chosen social sustainability, but by far the highest one is economic sustainability. Oh, sorry, I didn't see this final one. 50% have actually mentioned all areas. Okay, fantastic. Right. True or false, construction industry accounts for 38% of CO2 emission globally. So 75% have chosen true, 25% false. It's true. It does account for 38% of CO2 emissions globally. CO2 emissions have reduced in the UK. That's a very interesting set of responses of 50-50s, think through true and false. Interestingly, it has reduced since the 1990s, so that's some good news, really. Which countries in the world have the highest CO2 emissions? That's the correct answer. Most of you have chosen the correct answers. It's China, United States, and India. They have the highest CO2 emissions. In your opinion, where does responsibility lie for ensuring that sustainability is built into project practices? So 50% have chosen organization level, 33% sector level, and 17% project level. Very interesting set of results. And I'm sure we will have lots of food for thought during the day with the presentations and lots of opportunities for discussions. Okay, so by this, I would like to hand over to Professor Simon Philbin for the keynote. Thank you very much, everyone, and hope you enjoy the day. Simon, you seem to be on mute, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, we can't hear you there, Simon, for some reason. Some sounds dropped out. No worries. No.
No.
Oh, there we go. There we go. You're back.
Oh, right. Okay. That's strange. Always a little technology gremlin to creep in there. Just going to share the screen. Hopefully that's coming through now.
It is.
Yes. And fingers crossed the audio will continue with us as well. So yes, many thanks for the introduction there. And I'd also like to thank Dr. Sarah Haji Kazemi and for organising this event, and thanks Neil for the setup for the meeting as well. And yes, I'm delighted to be giving this first presentation at the virtual conference, Changing the World One Project at a Time. And my name is Simon Philbin. I head up a team called the Natu Puri Institute for Engineering and Enterprise at London South Bank University. And the title of the paper, the presentation, is Measuring Sustainability Impact for Infrastructure Projects from the Construction Industry. I'd also like to acknowledge Dr. Paul Mansell, who was a doctoral researcher in my team. Paul has now graduated with his PhD, and I will be talking through Paul's research project as part of the presentation today. Okay, so let's dive straight in really and go into the subject of sustainability. Well, of course, you know, we all know that the COP26 meeting is taking place this week in Glasgow. More than 25,000 people have come together to set out plans to tackle climate change. And why are they doing this? Well, according to a recent report only a couple of months ago from the IPCC, they're stating that climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying. In fact, they're saying that many of the changes observed in the climate are unprecedented in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And some of the changes are already set in motion, such as the continued sea level rise. And in terms of that example of climate change, you know, we can see an example there on the left, and that's this Pedersen glacier. And we can see the picture roughly about 90 years ago. the substantive massive glacier there in the valley, and then fast forward nearly a century, and the glacier has significantly retreated into the mountain there, and we see the open grassland. And that's directly a lot of evidence to support that is due to the increase in the global temperature. And as the glacier has been subjected to high temperature, it's melted, and that's resulting in the sea level rising. And maybe what's even potentially more worrying there is that the sea level rise, or the rate of sea level rising, appears to be accelerating. And so in this context, I think it's clearly now important more than ever that we should be discussing the role of projects and project management in tackling sustainability and the major challenges that exist. So in terms of the contents of the presentation, I'll provide just a little bit more wider background on the sustainability challenge to help set the scene, move on to talk about sustainable development and the SDGs, and start to focus on sustainability in infrastructure projects, and then give some highlights from a research study that we carried out. In terms of that wider background then on the sustainability challenge, and I appreciate this has been discussed, I suppose, quite a bit recently at the COP26, but I think it's always useful to provide the background. There is a lot of data now that indicates we are seeing an increase in the global average temperature across the planet, and this particular data is pointing to an increase of about 1.2, 1.3 degrees Celsius, but clearly it's above 1 degree Celsius, and that's from the pre-industrial baseline. And that coincides with a period where there's been heavy usage of hydrocarbons and burning of fossil fuels, and the resulting CO2, which is a greenhouse gas, is resulting in climate change. Now, there is also the role of methane, which is indeed an even stronger greenhouse gas potential. But nevertheless, CO2 is substantially driving the increase in the global average temperature. In terms of the kind of projections that we can think of some data here, and indeed going back to 2015 at the Paris Climate Conference, there was an agreement to try and limit the increase to 2 degrees. And then a few years later, in 2018, it really became apparent that limit should be ideally be 1.5 degrees. So it's accepted that we're already seeing global warming. It's a case now of how much we can limit the global warming. And as that chart shows there, in order to get anywhere near to 1.5 degrees, we have to hit a kind of net zero point for CO2 emissions in the 2050, 2060 kind of time frame across the world. This would be assuming the whole world could hit net zero. And indeed, if we don't do that, then we're potentially looking at temperature increases higher, 2 degrees, or maybe even much higher if the current policies are followed. So clearly, urgent action is needed in this context of sustainability. But there are other dimensions of sustainability that we could think about. So, we could consider the growth in the population across the planet. Currently around the kind of 8 billion people number. Long-term estimates, there's a lot of variability. We may reach a peak population in the coming years and then it levels off, or it may continue to increase. And so we can think about, do we have the energy, material, resources to sustainably service that level of population? And indeed, the data at the moment would indicate that we don't, because unfortunately, large parts of the southern hemisphere still have to exist on, relatively very modest amounts, less than $2 a day there, and would be regarded as being under the poverty line. So there are certainly different dimensions of sustainability in the kind of wider context. And moving on then to think about the concepts of sustainable development and the SDGs themselves. Well, to kind of address climate change and those other important areas that I mentioned, a number of years ago now, back in the 1980s, the United Nations pulled together a commission which became known as the Bruntland Commission, and the former Prime Minister of Norway, Gro Harlem Brundtland, was leading this commission, and they came up with an important definition of sustainable development. And they defined it as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And I think really to kind of deconstruct that, I mean, it's a case that, you know, we could potentially stop traveling tomorrow, let's say, and that would massively reduce our CO2 emissions. You know, we could stop going on aeroplanes, we could stop going on trains and things, but that wouldn't really allow us to meet our needs today. So really sustainable development means that we can continue to develop as a society and do the things that we want to do today, but without compromising what people can do in the future, without impacting negatively the environment, so that future generations can also meet their needs. And that's where, you know, the major challenge comes, of course. And then we had the SDGs, which were developed, and the SDGs in 2015, a set of 17 of these, which were ratified by 193 governments. And the idea is to work towards achievement of these SDGs by 2030. And there are, you know, areas such as no poverty, zero hunger, responsible consumption and production. Now, these SDGs are backed up by 169 specific targets, but also there are 244 indicators. So there's quite a lot of complexity that sits behind the SDGs. But these are global goals, so-called. They're also called the global goals, and they are agreed in an international framework, and they're also national level targets. But the key question then is, how can we translate these national level goals into real world and measurable activities within organizations and projects, so that we can actually make a difference? And that's really at the heart of our research. How do we translate the SDGs down to an organizational and indeed a project level? Thinking about sustainability then and infrastructure projects as the particular case. Well, in terms of the level of investment across the world in global infrastructure, there's some data here actually from the consultants McKinsey and from the Global Infrastructure Hub. And they're projecting that up to the year 2040, there's potentially over $90 trillion worth of investment in infrastructure, clearly, you know, an enormous amount across the world, with including, they're saying $3.5 trillion specifically to meet the SDGs. And the report highlights that with this kind of massive investment across the world, the ongoing investment in the built environment and infrastructure, it really represents a unique opportunity to stimulate economic prosperity, reduce poverty, and raise standards of health, education, and gender equality, if we can build in to this infrastructure investment sustainability outcomes. Infrastructure projects then do represent an ideal opportunity to help us achieve the SDGs, but how can we do this is the question. Now, there's a framework has been developed recently, and this is an interesting model from the UK government, from the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. And here they're trying to depict, or they are depicting, the built environment as part of a so-called system of systems, of interlinked systems. So we have, the built environment, which provides a foundation on which the different services, whether it's electrical services, energy, telecommunications, provides that foundation for the services to be delivered, but also interacts and builds upon the natural environment. And in this particular model, decisions relating to project level, to the asset level, those decisions are enabled through data that's made available from the system of systems, from services, from the built environment and the natural environment. But there's also a recognition that decisions on whether an infrastructure project should go ahead can also be informed by the societal outcomes, the societal dimensions and the SDGs. And this is a nice way of depicting the connections there. But again, the questions arise, well, exactly how do you integrate those SDGs into a specific decision on whether to invest in a new asset or a new infrastructure project? Final point on this diagram is they particularly note the relevance of digital technology and a particular type there of digital twins as a way of gaining more data from the system of systems. And if we can leverage more digital technology, potentially that could be viewed as an enabler to support sustainability in infrastructure projects. Moving on then to think about, for me to just talk through the highlights from our research study, which has been carried out over the last couple of years. And in terms of some selected theory, initially just to think about some theory on the sustainability perspective, well, there was an article by Thacker et al. A couple of years ago, and they identified, of course, infrastructure is part of SDG 9. Industry, innovation and infrastructure. But it's also been recognized that infrastructure systems, either directly or indirectly, actually influence all 17 of the SDGs. For example, if you're trying to improve education provision, then you need schools and buildings to actually have the teaching take place. Of course, there may be a virtual element there as well, but and in terms of moving towards renewable energy systems, then there is the infrastructure, for example, to support electric vehicles or for renewable energy, wind farms and the like. So certainly interacting with all of the SDGs. And then a key theory, and I'm sure a number of you may have seen this before, but the so-called triple bottom line by Elkington a number of years ago, where the thinking was to move beyond companies only traditionally many years ago being focused on the financial bottom line, and then moving to a position where sustainable development occurs when there are positive outcomes according to the economic dimension, as well as the environmental and the social. And sometimes this is called the people, planet, profit, or even prosperity, I think is a new version of profit there. So that's from the sustainability perspective. From the project management perspective, a couple of further theory examples here. So work by Shenhar and De Vere, really over a number of years, they pointed towards the benefits of taking a more holistic or systems perspective of the overall performance of projects. So the iron triangle, of course, is still important, but can we consider a longer term perspective, a broader dimension to understand the overall performance of projects? And also in regard to this kind of broader view, we can think about the so-called theory of change. Researchers such as Weiss and others, really they put forward the premise that in order to understand the overall performance of projects and initiatives, we should really take account of the successive stages that are involved, a little bit like the project life cycle. So can we consider the sustainability characteristics of the inputs to a project, what we do within a project, the activities, the near-term outputs, more intermediate outcomes, and then indeed the longer-term outcomes? And if we're able to do that, then again, we have this kind of broader consideration of sustainability. In terms of our building on the literature review, we were able to develop a series of research propositions, and they're listed there. And just briefly to run through them. So P1 was that we found there is currently a gap in the knowledge base in regard to understanding how you do measure SDG performance at the project level. P2, the definition of infrastructure projects should be viewed from this systemic perspective with a broader consideration of overall performance. P3, although there is knowledge in the importance of sustainability on infrastructure projects, there's really a lack of awareness of how to measure the performance against the SDGs. And P4, measurement of SDG performance should accommodate that triple bottom line. And then P5, measurement of the SDG performance should really span that full project life cycle. So we had the propositions feeding into the research methodology, and this was based on a sequential mixed method research strategy, really. So a key part was the survey of engineers, followed by a more deep dive into involving the interviews of organizations. And so this allowed quantitative data as well as qualitative insights, a kind of a richer picture that you can gain from qualitative research. And then we had case study validation. The overall objective is to improve our understanding of how to measure SDG performance of infrastructure projects. In terms of the survey of engineers, so 325 engineers, roughly about half of them from Europe and the rest across the world, and a significant number of the respondents with 20 plus years. So nearly half. So a lot of experienced engineers were surveyed. In terms of some highlights from the survey, so the question, a simple question, is measuring and reporting SDGs impact important? And nearly 90% were saying, we're agreeing, yes, agree or strongly agree. So a clear recognition that it is important. In terms of which SDGs engineering projects can make an impact against, highlighting how there are multiple SDGs. So SDGs 6, 7, 9 and 11, all being viewed as areas where the engineering projects, infrastructure projects will have a major impact. But other SDGs as well, such as 13, 15 and 12, highlighting how there is scope to impact multiple SDGs, but to a varying extent, of course. Other highlights in terms of a survey of engineers. So we found, in both these cases, they were asked to identify multiple answers. That's why the percentages don't add up to 100. But in terms of the greatest challenges for measuring SDG impact, areas such as being able to clearly define success, business priorities, and the need for leadership, as well as other areas, but also opportunities identified. Again, opportunity for leadership to step up, a clear role for increased education, and a need for tools that can help support project managers in this area. Moving on to the interviews of organizations. So this is a bit of a busy diagram here, but it's really to depict the kind of structure that was used to analyze the qualitative data, the so-called nodal framework, excuse me, which is possible through using the NVivo software, where you identify the key theory areas, and then you could do frequency of keywords according to the theory, the areas of theory. And there were interviews of 40 CEOs and corporate heads of sustainability. And this research partnered with the Institution of Civil Engineers. Probably almost running out of time a little bit, so I'll just maybe go a little bit quicker through these. But this was really to illustrate how we had supporting data in terms of keyword analysis. And the top one there was some of the analysis from the qualitative interviews. And it found that there is evidence that SDGs can be measured excuse me, at all three levels: the projects, programs, and the portfolios. And in terms of the summary of the findings from the survey, I think I've mentioned some of these points already. So there was a clear identification of the top-rated challenges for measuring the SDG impact of infrastructure projects, but as well as the top-rated opportunities. Interestingly, leadership featuring in both of those areas, as well as a number of other factors. And then the qualitative outcome from the interviews, we found a lot of evidence to support all of those propositions, either directly supported or were supported through inference, because there's a lot of data that's made available from 40 interviews of all those CEOs and heads of sustainability. Okay, so moving on to finishing off with the concluding remarks. I think hopefully I've set out that the infrastructure sector, and more specifically infrastructure projects, do represent a major opportunity to support sustainable development and achievement of the SDGs. The results of the research study indicate that whilst the idea, the concept of doing this is embraced in principle by infrastructure organizations, nevertheless in practice there are many challenges, but equally those are accompanied by a number of opportunities. And we found that it is possible to measure project success across that triple bottom line, and also through accommodating the theory of change and the full life cycle across the impact, to demonstrate the broader and longer term impact. And hopefully our research can be useful in terms of improving the knowledge of the conditions necessary to measure SDG performance for infrastructure projects. We managed to generate a number of articles, and they're listed there over the last year or two. So all our work has now been published across a range of different journals there and presented at various conferences. I'd like to acknowledge our various collaborators, Dr. Effie Constantinou, Professor Raoul Bamidamari, Prof. Tim Broyd, Ian Nicholson, Dr. Lucas Sabini, Denny Van Rooyen, and also collaborators at the Institution of Civil Engineers. And finally, also to acknowledge the work done by Dr. Paul Mansell. After his PhD, he's now associated with the UCL Bartlett School of Sustainable Construction as an honorary professor. And thank you everyone for listening. And I think we do potentially have just a few minutes available to take questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, for your presentation. If you have any questions for Simon, please do pop them in the Q&A box. We'll get round to them shortly. But Sarah, we'll hand over to you for our first question for Simon.
Yes, thank you very much, Simon. This was an excellent presentation, very thought-provoking as expected. So Simon, you mentioned in your final remarks that there are both challenges and opportunities with measuring SDGs in the infrastructure and construction sector. Would you be able to mention some of the challenges with measuring SDGs? Is it more about the implementation of the performance measures, for example, or is it more about getting the mindset in place?
Sure. I think that there are significant challenges. I mean, we found that there's a lot of enthusiasm and indeed sometimes a lot of the people joining the industry, the infrastructure industry, dare I say younger people, are very passionate about sustainability. So there is a lot of interest in this area. But a lot of the challenges come down to, well, exactly how do we do it? And how do we engage with the complexity of the SDGs? Because, okay, although there are only 17, when you start looking at all the indicators and the targets, which ones can we actually accommodate? And then if we go all the way down and think about at the project level, of course, there are many demands put upon projects and project managers, and there will be, building control and standards that are there. So do they necessarily have the capacity and capabilities to then go and start tracking achievement of that infrastructure project against all the SDGs and the various targets? So we found that there's definitely a need for user-friendly tools that can help projects and infrastructure projects, help them to understand how to track the progress of that project according to a prioritized set of areas for the SDGs. And I think many times people, organizations, they find that there is benefit in prioritizing, and rather than trying to track against all the 17 SDGs and all the indicators, try and prioritize to a smaller grouping and then show the impact that you're generating there. So yes, just some thoughts there.
Sure. Yes, and that was an excellent point. That kind of, there was my second question would be that obviously there needs to be a prioritization, especially given that the timelines with projects. That's obviously that's one of the main challenges. I myself, and I think probably measurement of some SDGs would be a bit more practical than some other. I'm working myself on SDG number 5, if I'm not mistaken, on gender equality in the construction sector, and there are some challenges, as you probably know, and measuring those because of the nature of it would be a bit more difficult than, for example, measuring environmental related elements. What are your opinions on those?
Yes, I mean, so some of the thoughts there go back to the work, for example, by Shenhar and Devere and their kind of diamond framework for project management, and they've advocated, that kind of the broader consideration of the performance of projects. So not just performance according to the Iron Triangle, but there are several other dimensions that they think about in terms of how does the organization change its capabilities? How are the people who work on the projects? How do they benefit, and the new skills? And we could think about gender and diversity in that regard. So in terms of sustainability, that's also part of these kind of wider set of kind of enhancements or benefits arising from projects. And so that goes in, I suppose that is aligned with the overall direction of project management and the thinking there to move beyond the Iron Triangle is still important. You've still have to deliver ideally within the schedule and stay within the budget. But what are these additional benefits that can be realized, whether they're the sustainability outcomes or in terms of how we are helping to improve gender equality and diversity on the projects as well.
Sure, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I see John has started sharing his screen. Or do we have some more minutes, Neil, for any questions, or should we move on to?
We will need to move on. Simon, thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Neil. Cheers.
Thank you. Next up, we have Professor John Ibahon from our LSBU School of Built Environment and Architecture. So, John, we'll hand over to you. You okay there, John? You're just on mute. Oh, bear with us 2 seconds, everyone.
Yeah, is that okay?
We can hear you
now.
Can you hear
John?
Me now? We can.
Yeah. So thank you very much for putting this event together, Neil and Sarah. And also, good morning to my colleagues that are presenting. On listening to Simon, I didn't, even though we live in the same building, I didn't know we have so much in common in the area of sustainability. My background is development economics, and I've taught applied economics to the built environment for almost 15 years. My interest is in sustainability and development with emphasis on developing countries. Personally, I sit on the board of United Nations Habitat as an international advisor and also project expert in this area. Following from what Simon did, I wouldn't be dwelling so much on the interlink between the built environment and the natural environment. But suffice to say that the built environment cannot exist without the natural environment and draws a lot of resources from the natural environment for its existence. In return, it gives back massive pollution. And the significance, everything that is being talked about, is interesting that Simon put on the screen the latter government's view on the built environment as being seen as one of the major sectors that are being used to spearhead this fight against environmental pollution. It is important to stress that 75% of all known factors responsible for environmental degradation derive from the built environment. The water we use, how we plan our cities. And so that is why the built environment is very, very significant. And also, excuse me, sorry. Yeah. And so part of these emissions, degradation, CO2 emissions. CO2, important as it is, in our last meeting in Spain, the United Nations panel meeting, UN Habitat, CO2, important as it is, it's not so much a problem these days. The biggest problem that we have now that is actually warming the environment up is water vapor. That is the biggest issue now. But there's a very strong connection. What that does, as the sea heats up, water evaporation takes place, it even worsens the impact of CO2 by trapping, the heat in the atmosphere. But it's very important to also consider the impact that the built environment is having in the generation of CO2. If you look at buildings here, is upmost top in transportation and industry. And you can see carbon dioxide rises, mean temperature increases, and the effect is the global warming that was so eloquently spoken about by Phil. But I thought I should put some of these up. As you can see, it's a range of events. And one of the major difficulties in managing this process, climate change, is this, that irrespective of the amount of infrastructure that you have, no matter how much mitigation processes that you put in place, because of the fact that you don't know how it's going to manifest, when it's going to manifest, you still run the risk of massive damages. We've seen that, in many parts of the world. In London the other time, the rain that was expected within 3 months fell within 2-3 hours, overwhelmed all our drainage and infrastructure. That is what is dangerous about climate change and the reason why we should take it seriously. I take into consideration that irrespective of the fact that so much needs to be done still in the environmental and economic aspect of sustainable development, significant inroads have been made in this area, either in terms of materiality and in terms of processes that have been put in place to enhance economic efficiency to cut waste. The only aspect relating to project management and the construction industry, which construction practitioners find extremely difficult to mainstream into construction policies or project management policies, is the social aspect of this. And so the social pillar is what I like to focus on here. If you look at the construction industry, the project that we talked about, there's a connection between the economic sustainability and social sustainability, because economic sustainability has two aspects to it. The aspect that is almost being projected is the efficiency aspect. Now, the distributive aspect, whereby you use the project to generate local economic development, create employment opportunity for local area, empower women, etc., are generally being viewed by construction practitioners outside their scope, unless it is insisted upon by the government, as we saw, or major event organizers, such as the 2012 Olympics, which was the major factor that led to Britain winning that bid, and all the measures that were put in place, the process through which that was delivered. It remains one of the main projects all over the world that are specifically addressed social sustainability at the inception of the project. So that is a very strong case in point. If you look at construction industry, it's one of the most dangerous industries in the world. There's more accident and fatalities on construction side than other sectors, of the economy. And when we go about looking at how wonderful buildings are, I was at a conference in Cape Town when they were presenting the old Union building and the architecture of it, and the emotions surrounding the development and the design. And I simply asked a question: how many lives did it take to complete that building? And there was dead silence in the room. So when we look at these buildings and we put these questions across, or we ask developers, once you finish your project during the commissioning, put how many lives it took to construct that building, or serious accident, people that have been deformed and disabled for life, then people's opinion will begin to change. You begin to understand that sustainability does not just end with environment and economics. There are huge social aspects of it that we cannot ignore. Modern slavery, construction industry provides opportunity for this practice to take place. I think the latest study by CIOB found that during the lockdown, about 60 to 65% of all the reported cases of slavery, modern slavery, related to the construction industry, because of the nature that of concluding the businesses and conducting those activities. If you look at the construction industry, its relationship with the gender attributes, 48% of women, when they were surveyed, felt discriminated against by the industry. 73% of these felt they had passed over for projects based on gender. 73% of them were female. And if you look at the industry as a whole, 47% did not even have single woman on their board. Now, the figure on the right, the number of thousands of UK employees, just look at the construction sector and trade, and look at 0.9% women representative there compared to other related industries. So against this background, you begin to ask questions, some fundamental questions. Most construction firms will readily show off their sustainability policies and documents. I have an MSc student doing some work with me now. The survey we've carried out, it was quite revealing how many of them claim to have sustainability policies, strategies, but then when it comes to delivering the project, 30% of buildings failed performance test on delivery, which means this has a very serious implication when it comes to project implementation. It means that the buildings that have been designed to specificity regarding sustainability attributes are not actually delivered. And it becomes too late to begin to open these buildings up, to begin to find out whether the specified material to the right amount and quantity, have been used. We also see the gross violation of human rights in terms of labor laws. Then you look at construction managers and construction project managers abound. They are there. So what is missing? And if you look at the way the industry operates, you have construction manager that sits, on top, And then you have project managers. These are hands-on, managers of the construction process that are actually on site, and they report, to a construction manager, all activities that get on, on construction site. In some of these studies and the leading student to site, I saw that construction managers have, if you like, a pivotal role to play, given their place in the procurement, system. The problem that we found with most of these buildings is what we call knowledge break, because the architects that design the buildings, and the services engineers or structural engineers that, design their aspects are often not on site. It is left to the project manager. And because of that break in knowledge, you find that there's a discrepancy between what is designed and what contractors, want to build and want to design. And so that creates friction between the project manager, in most cases, contractors and subcontractors, because, the trade, everyone, the profit margin is very, very low. Both property developer, contractors and subcontractors are looking for opportunities, to have the markup on their margin. And there's no better way of doing that than cutting back on materials. And so that is why the role of project managers, we deem it to be fundamental to actually upholding the tenets and principles of sustainability, on site. If you look at some of the reasons given for project failure in the light of what I'm discussing, one of the factors that is stressed is the fact that poor project management is often the result of a lack of skilled staff in middle and upper management. And this, again, is what you find responsible for the inadequate, supervision and interpretation of what company policies and procedures. So taking all of this together is very important to begin to see how project management and project managers can begin to address this issue. Have they got the capacity to address this issue, taking into consideration that they work for either the contractors or the subcontractors, and often you find a collusion between the developer themselves and the subcontractor and contractors because of a long-term existing relationship, between them. Okay, and so there have been so many definitions of sustainable project management. I looked at it and paraphrasing or emphasizing Sabini and Oderman is one of the definitions of sustainable project management that I find encapsulate not just the product itself, which is sustainably, but the process by which you deliver it. If you look at some of the transition that has taken place in the construction over the last 20 years, when we moved away, when we deconstructed the construction industry and moved away from all in-house to contractors and subcontractors, we thought we were saving money. Yes, considerable amount of money was saved in the sense that the use of building materials, heavy equipment as a monopoly for gaining access to a high value in contract, vanished. So everything now comes back to project management. If you put your houses in order, you can hire the equipment to enable you deliver, assets. But one of the areas where savings was also made was in warehousing. So the concept of just-in-time delivery, but nobody at the time foresaw the sustainability implication in terms of moving in and moving out of goods and services and the CO2 implication, that brought about. But if you look at during the London Olympics, that was quickly spotted by the project manager. And they made a rule that no delivering lorry brings goods and services to construction site and leaves empty. So, and this usually relates to pallet. From that, Pallet UK developed, whereby you come in, you drop your goods and you take the pallets away, rather than an empty lorry coming in from several miles away to take the pallet and go back. And so the whole of that, a huge proportion of CO2, was saved. So why are we saying that project manager can be bastions of sustainability? They are uniquely placed. Okay, they are uniquely placed to sustain the sustainability features and attributes of projects, to ensure that they are delivered. Some years ago, one student from South Korea, who is an architect, wanted to do a PhD under my supervision. To tell you how serious this issue is, it's not even be talked about so much. His frustration was he substituted for somebody who was not on duty as a site architect. He was quite shocked that what the architects sit down day and night to design, meeting with all the sustainability codes, that are emphasized by the government and the regulatory authority, is completely different from what is built. And his architectural design firm worked for some of the major department stores that I can't mention the name. So we decided to try and carry out some study. They would not let us get near anywhere the properties. We couldn't do anything to progress that investigation. And that tells,
John,
a huge story about what is going on, in the sense that not what architects necessarily design, not most of the sustainable attributes designed into buildings are built. So if we are able to equip project managers with the necessary skills and competencies, one, to interpret the regulations and pass that on to contractors and subcontractors, who say that projects can be delivered sustainably. But however, we know that there are tough challenges. As I said before, the project manager works either for the contractor or the subcontractor, or even the main contractor itself. So he has he's torn between that and whatever his own interest and beliefs is sustainability. So you have to have interpersonal communication skill to persuade and reconcile divergent views between all the various, stakeholders. Project managers should be given protection, in my view, in law, similar to whistleblowers, for calling out rogue developers, contractors that deliberately, for pecuniary interest, breach the regulations. Sustainability should be embedded, not an appendage, to project management curriculum.
Just 1 minute remaining, John.
Yeah, I'm just finishing. As you can see, seeking sustainability in projects and combating climate change is not so much saving the planet. It's also about saving construction industry from an ugly and difficult future. It was said, if we begin to consume natural resources at the rate at which we are, when they are not replaceable, I wonder how future generations will be able to fulfill their own basic needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We will be back with you shortly for questions. Sarah, I'll hand over to you to introduce Luca.
Sure, yes. Thank you very much, John. This was a fantastic presentation, very close to some of the elements I personally have worked with, and I'm interested in that as well. So this really nicely connects to one of the questions in the poll on the responsibility, where the responsibility lies when it comes to embedding sustainability into the project practices. And from your presentation, we understand that you feel that, or your research shows that the responsibility could be on the project manager as well. In your opinion, what do you think would be the support that project managers would need in an organizational support that they would need to be the bastions of sustainability?
First of all, there's a presupposition that the organization they are in necessarily want to commit to sustainability. That's the first barrier. The second barrier is to equip them. If you look at most project management courses up and down the country, there's still a huge debate, even within the project management profession, whether or not sustainability is a liability or not. And my worry is project managers are repeating the fundamental mistake that architect made, very much earlier on, by not incorporating project management into architecture, by focusing wholly on design and allowing project management to emerge, as a separate discipline. I usually tease my students. I said, you guys are like what? You are like a consultant. A consultant will take the wristwatch off your hand and tell you the time. When you go to construction site, you find architects and you talk to a project manager on certain complicated issues. And he will say, okay, I'll have a discussion with the site architect and come back to you. Then I ask them, why can't an architect become a project manager? So but project management professionals have to be very, very careful. Now we are having, what do you call them? Sustainability officers all emerging, gradually and being stuck in building controls and housing office. And when they come, they tend to sort of duplicate the work of project managers. I strongly recommend that project management should be embedded into current project management curriculum, in the country.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. This was very interesting. I know that Luca is also, we're running out of time for Luca. In the meantime, while we hand over to Luca, thank you very much, John. The attendees, if you are anyone from the construction industry, we would love to hear your opinion on John's presentation as well. Okay, over to you, Luca. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, I assume you can see my slides.
We can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for inviting me to talk about sustainability and project management. This is certainly one of my the biggest research interest that I have, and I'm always happy to spend time and to discuss, implication and ramification and everything. And I can see that the presentation, I think, will be very well from the previous one. So it's that's thanks, Sarah, to put all together this presentation, a very coherent one with the other. So in this presentation, I'm going to discuss mostly what I have written in a paper which goes with the same title, more or less the same title, published very recently in Project Management Journal, and it is about, I am focusing on studying the profession themselves and how society is exerting this pressure to adopt sustainability, to consider sustainable business practice in the development, in the implementation of the project, but also sustainability as an objective in the project objectives. So, and I'm looking at specifically project managers and try to see what are the ways in which this profession is embedding these practices, if it is embedding these practices, and what are the issues coming with it. Well, in a normal setting, we would see each other and chat and discuss. So in online way, I just maybe spend a minute introducing myself. So I'm based in Hertfordshire University, just outside London. As I said, my topic is project management as a research with strong focus on sustainability. If you would like to ask any question or to continue the discussion, there is my email, or you can connect on LinkedIn. Just type my name, or here the QR code. So building from what was saying Simon before, now the concept of sustainability is quite clear. Now the definition of what is sustainability, what is sustainable development is quite clear. So it's an idea. Sometimes I say it's an ideal in the sense that I believe that most of the final objectives of, for example, the SDGs are not achievable per se, but rather they are an aim to which we are going. For example, some of the things we will discover in 20 years that are not sustainable as we think they are now, or vice versa, where there are other things. So things can change. But in this sense, I think is an ideal. So it's a direction to point toward. But and also this is quite clear. We have the technologies, we have the instrument on how to become more sustainable. Still, we have some issues, and a major one on how to be more sustainable. And this is because when we move from the abstract concept to the context, to the practical context, things change quite a lot. So what is very clear as a definition, as an abstract concept, is not so much in practice. So, and this is because sustainability is very contextual. No, what is sustainable can change from sector to sector, or even within the same sector. No, construction project could focus more on reducing or embedding CO2 into project activities. Some other could look more into reducing pollution, or another project can focus on reducing energy consumption, reducing electricity consumption. So those are all sustainable objectives and are all fine to achieve, but maybe every project can pursue a different understanding or a different conception of what sustainability is. That is why I'm always been very curious about how then sustainability is implemented in projects, understand different characteristics that triggers the sustainability, understand what are the determinants that work as a barrier to sustainability or antecedents. But let's just try to have a bit of more focus. So I'll provide some examples, some descriptive examples of what I mean by highly contextual. So in strategic project decision, or in project appraisal, so which project I should select at maybe portfolio level, should I build a dam to increase the production of renewable energy, so electricity through renewable energy, but this dam will create a lake behind the dam, which will fill out the valley and maybe displacing local communities or reducing the land which is used for harvesting, so to produce food. So what is more sustainable here? Is it the electricity, or is considering the social aspects of the local communities, or producing food? So this is one of the issue that I always think when we translate the concept, the abstract concept into practice. There are a lot of trade-off. But even in project output, so if you move one level down, in a building, should I install sensors to monitor air quality in the building for quality of living, for example, if it's an office, or just make it as simple as possible and try to cut all electric appliances that consume electricity. So again, what is the aspects of the sustainability that we want to privilege in this project? There is a choice to make. We can't both go for both. And even maybe in day-to-day project decision. So if we move another layer, so affordable housing, should I put a thicker layer of insulation, which maybe is more expensive, so will increase the price of the house, making it not so affordable anymore. So again, you will save in the long term for sure in heating bills and electricity bills if the heat is produced through electricity. But in the short term, the house is not so affordable. So again, there is a trade-off decision to be made. That is one of the issue, no? How project manager then makes sense of sustainability. If society we see is making this strong pressure to consider sustainability in all business settings, not just project organizing settings, how we then expect project manager to make decision under these circumstances where there are competing objectives and trades-off. So yeah, this is the same I was saying a moment ago. How we expect that project settings are already complex, there are already trade-offs. So, and we added another layer of complexity, asking them to consider the environment and the social aspect as well in their decision making. So, what I did, that is the result of another research, but I think it fits very well in this presentation. So, I was asking what are the triggers and barriers to project managers. So, what are enablers or barriers for them to consider sustainable practices in their projects? And you can see here are just the top 3 barriers on the top: difficulty in demonstrating long-term benefits, other priorities, balancing long-term and short-term objectives. So this is one. These are 3 of the barriers, the most important barriers that project managers face when wanting to implement sustainability. So it has to be linked with the commercial benefits or financial benefits. There are other priorities of the project. So like sustainability is not something that is like an option or a nice to have feature, but if there are other priorities, I won't pursue those objectives. And then and this is quite well known in the literature, the difficulty of balancing long-term and short-term objective. How I expect that in a project which is time-bound activity to deliver benefits that realize maybe after the end of the project, maybe several years after the end of the project. So is one of the difficulties. And as a triggers, we have matched ethical concern, improved long-term performance, and were required by law. So were required by law. I put this item in my questionnaire just to see what happens. And actually, yeah, that was the feeling of the project managers. Needs to be the law and regulation and policies need to back up the decisions of project managers in regards to sustainability. Otherwise, they feel threatened to make this kind of decision. Again, long-term project performance. So this idea that has to be linked somehow with the project performances. And also very interesting, the first one is much ethical concern about the environment and society. So what a project manager is more willing to do is something that is aligned with his or her own beliefs. So what I did is some interviews with very experienced project managers in the UK, and I asked them basically what are the issues when they want or when they consider sustainability in their project. And they told me almost unanimously that there are a lot of tensions. You create issues and tensions for when you force sustainability into a project. And we touched a little bit this before, temporality of objectives. So how I expect to deliver a project in time and deliver the benefits to all the stakeholders, while those stakeholders are spread, if intended in a larger sense possible, also in time. So what are maybe the future stakeholders on a given infrastructure and what are stakeholders now? So there is this element of temporality, organizational barriers, and this was discussed a little bit before. Again, organizations are traditionally organized, structured in a way to maximize profits, and produce value, but which is a financial value. So how I expect within an organizational setting, a project manager to consider sustainability if this is not built in the structure and in the values of the organization. And also lack of power, knowledge of institutional support. So power is again connected with the barriers, lack of knowledge. This is probably because I was interviewing very experienced professionals. So while sustainability has recently started, probably in the past 10 years, to be embedded in the curricula, in the university curricula, in the masters and in MBAs and so on. So probably that was an element that was lacking in those very experienced professionals that had a background built from more years ago. And then institutional support, again, similar with organizational barriers. If there is the environment is not favorable to sustainability, they don't feel like supported by the institution. And what I was noticing is that, but still we recognize that sustainability is important. So we tend to, as a project manager, implement sustainability as sustainability objectives or include business practices, sustainable business practices in the project activities, when there was this win-win situation. So when it also matched the financial aspects. So wherever I can I can improve project performance, I can increase the return of the investment by including sustainability. Yeah, why not? That's a win-win situation. The risk with this attitude, I think, is that we lose a lot of potential innovation that we can have, because we say that sustainability is very contextual. So you learn in one project, you try to apply in another project, but you have still to make trial and errors. And if you pursue only win-win situation, you will never do experiments, never do trial and errors, never try to go beyond that is just win-win. So, that is my personal belief, that by pursuing only win-win solution, we are not going very far, because this win-win solution, so matching, implementing sustainability when it matches only implementing sustainability when it matches only financial aspects of the project is just a too narrow perspective. So what I did is, okay, let me look at the general management literature, how they treat paradoxes, how they treat trade-offs, how they treat this situation in which there is two opposing elements that cannot be reconciled when there are these tensions. And I found this nice framework from Han and his colleagues, where they develop two main strategies. One is acceptance strategy, and the other is a solution. So the acceptance strategy is basically is called opposition. So you distinguish that there is a paradox, there is a tension, or there is a trade-off. There are these two poles, two elements, two extremes that cannot be recognized, and you don't try to solve it. You keep it open and you accept and you live with it. Or resolution strategies, which are synthesis and separation. So separation is when you have these two elements and you just split them, separate in time or in space within the project. And I'll come to practical example in a minute. Or synthesis, so you change the angle, you change the point of view in a way that these two elements are not in trade-off or paradoxical, creating a paradoxical situation anymore. So there are these three main strategies. So what I did is to match these strategies, try to develop some practical strategies in light of what were the tensions. So first tension that I was mentioning before was the temporality of objectives, and acceptance, separation, and synthesis are the three strategies. So I'll just provide some examples. So if the problem is that short-term organizational goals collide, are in contrast with long-term sustainability-oriented goals, you can just accept, and you can, for example, allocate long-term goals to top management and then leave the project managers to focus on short-term. Or separation, you can implement mechanisms to award the achievement of both longer-term and short-term objectives at the same time. Even if those are contradictory, we just separate you can achieve both, or synthesis, you can maybe implement some flexible strategies that allow them allow short-term objectives to be shifted, moved in time. Another tension is the organizational barrier, so project versus personal view of sustainability. So acceptance strategy could be a mix of strategy with the possibility for project management to do some experimentation, or separation. You can focus on traditional strategies where there is no impact on sustainability, when there is no great importance of sustainable objectives in maybe in some in that aspect, and then leave niche areas to where you can pursue sustainability. Or you just can shift in a synthesis strategy, organizational best practice toward more sustainability oriented ones. There's another example, so lack of power, how you overcome this, so the conflict of power over decision regarding sustainability. Acceptance strategy, you can cultivate organizational climate with the informal and constructive debate, so where project managers at the lower level can inform top management. Or separate again, so create spaces where project manager can implement their own sustainability objectives. Or synthesis again, you can have strategies with the help and contribution of project managers that then are responsible for their implementation. Conscious of the time, I want to go through all of the tensions. So this is the table that the full table that you find in the paper. If you are interested, I just provide the first 3 examples. Yeah, as I said, I will be very happy to discuss this further with anyone interested. But yeah, due to time constraint, I'm not taking track of time, but I think I need to finish. So thanks a lot for listening to the presentation.
Thank you very much, Luca, and congratulations on getting this very interesting paper accepted. It's very new, isn't it?
Yeah, it's this year, maybe a few months ago. Well, no, the publication process, yeah, it started.
Yes, it takes some time. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, fantastic, Luca. I'm very mindful that you need to leave because you mentioned
sorry about this.
Time constraints. So. Unless there are some questions, and I'm very interested in reading the papers, that's something I'll definitely do. Any questions from the audience? We can obviously go through those. Otherwise, we're going to let you go and attend your busy schedule.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, as you can see, I'm connecting from an Airbnb today, so I'm on the run. So
sure, absolutely. And obviously, we will share your contact details with the audience as well, and they can get in touch if there's anything they would like to discuss with you or any kind of joint collaborations in their mind.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, great. So Neil, I assume we do have a couple of minutes for the Q&A.
We do. John, yes, we do. John, would you like to join us on screen? That would be great. Just give me a moment.
And meanwhile, while John is joining, I would really like to encourage our audience, especially the ones in the construction sector, and I know there are a few of you there, from the poll results. We would really like to hear your opinion on what we've discussed up to now. And it's been a lot of it has been about the construction and infrastructure sector. Any questions, any comments, any experience you've had within this area recently? It is quite a new trend in organizations. Which is great, but obviously it's a time-consuming. It takes time to set that mindset and get the practices in place. So,
hey, John.
Hi, John.
So we'll hold off for audience questions. If you have any, please pop them in the Q&A box. Sarah will hand over to you for some questions for John.
Thank you very much. Yes. Great. Okay, John. So I see that your presentation very nicely, and I know that you cited Luca's job. What is your opinion on the link between what Luca just mentioned and your own research?
There isn't there isn't much different. I think it's a matter of emphasis because we are different. We are coming from different disciplines to look at sustainability from our different perspectives. Sometimes it boils down to issues of semantics and understanding. As a development economist, my view on sustainable development transcends just infrastructure. It goes deeper. The question I wanted to pose to Simon earlier on was whether he believes, irrespective of the billions and trillions that is promised, whether it's possible to achieve SDG goals without carrying the developing countries along. You see, so I mean, it's not just a question of infrastructure. There are deeper division, bridge that needs to be, a gap that needs to be bridged between the developing and the developed countries to even begin. Either, you know, the developed countries stop whatever they are moving in terms of rapid growth and let developing countries come up, you know, or they pay for the privileges of keeping the developing countries where they are. And to expect that people will remain the way they are and not try to develop using every kind of resources that they have, deplete them, it is very, very difficult. And wearing my economic development hat is that there isn't much that needs to be done, really. If the developed countries just pay real wages, real prices for raw materials and commodities, you will see a total transformation, you know, because most of the multinational companies that operate in developing countries are not even allowed to be charged taxes, you know. So you have a company in California operating in Nigeria, they cannot even tax them for the resources, but California state or United States government can tax them on their global profit. It doesn't make sense. You know, so all these things are interlinked. So that's why when I see them talking about SDGs, I look at it as SDGs is actually meant to keep these countries where they are. It's not to propagate them, because the 3 billion and whatever that is being talked about, what percentage is going to go to developing countries? It beggars belief.
Absolutely, very, very interesting point. So I hear that the role of politics is also quite significant when it comes to elements of sustainability. Great. So we have a question in from David Nicholson at I'm not sure how to pronounce the company, Veolia, at Veolia.
Veolia, yeah.
Yes, we have lofty environmental goals, but that doesn't readily translate into changes in local project management practices. Do you have any specific changes we could employ? Suggestions for specific changes?
Yes, it depends on it depends on what he's referring to as local project management, you know, practices. Mm-hmm. If it is local in terms of the demographic of areas that he lives in, you know, if it is local in terms of educating and empowering people within the areas that he lives in, for example, educating them on the need to recycle. I know that Veolia is a waste management, you know, company, assisting and educating them on how they need to proceed. Then if Veolia has, I'm sure they have what we call corporate social responsibility. They have the opportunity to participate further in the locality, you know, by using their services and their wherewithal to bring the local population on board. And so there are various things they can do. I'm sure there are also third sector, charity organizations in the local area. And one other area that they can participate in, that they can actually facilitate, is recycling, circularity. I mean, they can open local shops, where you can sell recycled products, and then because that will also help empower local people in terms of affordability and having access to some of these facilities. If you look at, there are some families that cannot even afford to buy or replace a jacket, their children. You would not believe this, Sarah. I actually wept one day when I went to drop my child in a school. One of the ladies brought the child, had 3 children, but because they said that the children, all of them must come in a onesie, the child is too small to understand why the mother could not buy her a onesie. The mother didn't have the money to buy the son a onesie, and I had to drive them. The mother was crying, the child was crying. This is in the United Kingdom. So there are various ways in organizations such as Veolia can help. Another area where they can help, they can upgrade and improve, the rate of waste recycling. Because if you look at the way solid waste, pile up in certain areas and bringing vectors and all those kind of stuff in, and so there are various things they can do. May I say that, they are very, very disciplined organization, and I can see the work that they do in the community. I think the importance of his question is, how can they deepen what they are already doing?
Right, fantastic. Yes, and David is responding. Yes, it was just to see if there were any easy development goal wins in construction project management. That is from David Nicholson. Is that the same in Veolia? Okay, so it's David. Would you like to elaborate whether what kind of type of work in Veolia you're working with, because you're talking about construction project management, and that's probably different from the operations. We're just waiting for David to respond, elaborate on that. Meanwhile, I'm not sure if Simon is still online. It would be great, Simon, if you would like to respond to John's question that he raised for you.
Yes, I mean, it was a good point. John was mentioning the political dimension, and yes, I mean, in some respects, it's easy to point to these charts with the kind of big numbers there. I mean, ultimately, as economies develop, they need infrastructure as an underpinning component of that development. So I suppose it's a case of, can we build into the existing trajectory of infrastructure investment? Can we build into that the positive outcomes of realizing sustainability at the same time? But admittedly, there will be trade-offs, absolutely. And indeed, even with the SDGs, you can have situations where it's widely reported where you could target one SDG in terms of trying to improve production of crops and through using herbicides and the like, and that may then result in more pollution. So that's a kind of basic one, but it's well known that there are trade-offs in trying to target one SDG with a positive outcome and potentially having a negative outcome on another SDG. And I think, well, they are aspirational. I think it is a good thing that they are there, that we're trying to work towards minimizing poverty and having clean water. But the path to eventually get there is non-trivial. It's not a linear process. And there is a lot of complexity. And I think that's why it's an exciting area in science and technology and management, because just helping to chart that course to kind of realize those sustainable outcomes. Will they all be realized by 2030? Probably not realistically, but as long as we can keep moving the dial forward, that's, I think, a good aspiration to have.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that was an excellent point, Simon, about the conflicting kind of practices when it comes to the SDGs. One of the challenges, especially I think, and probably John can comment on this as well, in developing countries when it comes to environmental sustainability, is that it's costly. It's costly, and sometimes they can't afford move towards that, which is kind of in contrast with developed countries that they can actually invest in to support that. Any ideas on that, John?
No, if you look at that, again, if I'm wearing my developing countries hat, I would say that the kind of projects that are being brought to be implemented, that are used to process sustainability in the developing countries, have little or no relevance, to them. Take, for example, I went to Kenya and I saw green peas, right? Mountain of green peas. These women have been working on the tills, etc., etc. You know what happened? There is a sieve they use in sieving sand. The holes are big. That is what the agent of the company uses. Any piece that falls through doesn't meet the quality, i.e., it's only the bigger ones that meet the taste, of Europeans that, is picked up. So, you can have 20 tons of peas and only 5 tons will be picked out of it. And you've already encouraged those people to sacrifice land that they could have used to grow staple food, to grow those peas. And the proceeds from the peas they have grown cannot even buy, the maize and whatever that, they are importing for your country because of exchange rate variability. To me, slavery hasn't gone. It has just taken a new dimension. And I say this at the United Nations, I say this wherever I go, because if you actually see what is happening, it is quite tragic. For example, when I was growing up in Africa, I never felt I was poor, never. You know why? Because I lived in my vicinity, everyone looked the same and I'm happy. Why then do you come and show me how they live in Oxford Street or Washington and tell me if my house is not built with brick and glasses, I am not civilized? What do you think you are doing? How am I going to build bricks and brick houses? What is the definition of a house? If I sleep on the tree, my forefathers or whatever have been doing that for centuries and I'm happy, who are you to come and tell me what I have to do and how I have to liquefy my natural, assets in order to meet 1/10? Now, if you look at the structural adjustment that was taken to Africa, they don't even have local television program anymore. They don't even have local content. Everything is CNN, BBC, World Service, and whatever. So what do you pump out? And no one links that to migration. If you keep showing somebody every day, say, look, no matter how hard you are working, you are living a meaningless life. But here is the part of the world where if you do X, Y, Z, you are okay. My colleagues that finish university with me, they are also professors back home. They may not be able to change the slippers on their feet because of the exchange rate variation, right? But I can just send 100 pounds to them and transform the life of whatever. You can see there's a lot of issues that goes here. If we really, really want to, change the world the way it is, we need to revisit, the equalization, look at the exchange rate mechanism and look at what we do. Let me give you as an example. Ghana.
Sorry to interrupt, John. I'm just wondering whether we should all have the 2-minute silence. It's 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Sure. Would that be okay, Sarah?
Yes.
Yes, sure. I mean, we will get back to John. Some very interesting points, John. Absolutely.
But sorry to interrupt, John. I
No
noticed it was 11 o'clock.
That's okay.
But let's go with the 2 minutes. Thanks for one of the audience who have flagged this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll stop recording.
Slavery. There's a stream of research recently in the project management among project management scholars on modern slavery, especially in construction and infrastructure. So that was an excellent point that you raised, very relevant to project work as well. Yes, please go on with your.
Yeah, I mean, if you leave that aside, the other aspect to the Sustainable Development Goal, why can't the developed nations simply say to leaders of the developing world, you know, we would not allow you to starch the wealth of your citizens in our banks. If you don't trust your citizens enough to put your money and invest it in your country, then it means you are not doing a good job. If they can do that, that will even be far more than the foreign direct investment that they are transferring. Why should Boris Johnson come and tell the president of Nigeria that there are children starving in your own country? Why can he see this from London and the man there cannot see it himself? You know, when you look at the international community and various organizations, these are community of, you know, they have certain codes. And in this code should be employed. It shouldn't just be come and then we celebrate and we go back. Anyway, it's a debate we need to follow, not to keep nailed.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would love to sit together both with yourself and Simon as well. There are lots of interesting common interests I see, and we're both, you know, we're all in sitting very close physically, but we haven't had the chance to do this yet. So definitely something to follow up. And at the moment, I think we are. It's time for a short comfort break. Is that right, Neil?
It is. Yes. It's time for a short comfort break. So we'll break until 11:10, and then we'll be back for our next two presenters. So thank you very much, everyone. See you shortly.
Fantastic. So after the comfort break, we will have Merv Wyeth from Project Management Institute.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back from our quick comfort break, very quick comfort break, went so fast, everyone. We now have two more speakers for you. And first up, we have Merv Wyeth from the Project Management Institute with Merv's presentation, Can the Power of Projects Transform the Net Zero Landscape? Merv, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Neil. Thank you, Zara, for having me as part of your conference. Really delighted to be here. Got 20 minutes. I'm going to zip through my slides, but I don't want to leave you behind. I'd like you to join me with Mentimeter. I understand most of the audience are pretty used to Mentimeter. You'll see that there's a Menti code in the chat and the link to menti.com. If you go to that, perhaps on your computer or on a phone, then that would be great. There's a QR code. And again, that 8-digit code that you can see there, 364157773. So I want to know a little bit about what you think. And also you'll be able to give me some feedback as we go through the emojis and that sort of thing. So can the power of projects transform the net zero landscape? What we're going to talk about this morning is, I'm going to provide an introduction. That's from me to you and from you back to me, hopefully through Mentimeter. I'm going to talk about the Project Management Institute. Some of you may know lots, others may not have even heard of us. That's fine. I'll give you a bit of an insight into the organization. I'm going to talk about volunteering with PMI UK chapter. So PMI is a global organization, UK chapter, something like 2,800 of us. We're going to talk about how we're developing our net zero roadmap. And then I want to talk to you about a strategic initiative called Hours for Impact that's related to the UN SDG. And we're going to finish up with a quick look at performance. So that's our agenda that we're going to go through now. So first of all, the introduction. So a little bit about myself, only a little bit. You can read more if you flash your QR code there at my LinkedIn, and also then there's my PMI email address. But I'm one of many volunteers for PMI UK. I happen to sit on the board, and I'm the director for branches. And with COVID, the role has very much changed. So that includes branches and digital events. And we see ourselves in terms of digital events on some sort of journey, and we're running a program to do that. So I'm effectively the director of a program for branches and digital events. And in my working life, I work as a program manager, and I work with some software that really looks at benefits management, or benefits realization management, as the PMI like to call it. So what I'd like to know first of all is, where in the world are you joining us from today? And we typically ask this question of our audience, a global audience, and it's always fun to find out where people are coming from. I'm come here thinking that you know, most of our people are going to be from the UK. If you are able to vote, then please do. We can find out a little bit about where you are. I happen to be based down here in not so sunny Sussex today, and we've got someone in from Barbados. That's absolutely fantastic. Welcome to you. I'm kind of guessing most people are going to be London based. Do please vote if you're able, and we can add to that. Let's move on. So the next question we ask is, in which industry or sector do you typically work? And here we typically see in kind of project management terms in our organizations, significant numbers that are working within the traditional industries such as construction and engineering, and also then working within ICT, within government, etc. So thank you for that. And then I hesitate because there's so few people on here to wait for the answers on this one. In fact, I can just, for demonstration purposes, show you a few test votes coming in. But here we divide people up in terms of their being involved in leadership, in delivery, where the bulk of our people are, business change or analysis, or indeed across academia. So we get a good feel, and we essentially can segment and look our audience from that basis. So that's that one. And again, we'd look really, in terms of my talk, at the qualifications or credentials you either hold or teach. And typically we see a wide range. The traditional ones were Prince 2 and MSP. There's the PMI equivalents, things like the PMP, etc. And I can see the MAPM. I think that's the APM qualification, but MSc and also CAPM, the kind of the introduction, if you like, to the PMP. So a range coming through. Yeah, the chartered project professional and BA. So a nice wide range there in terms of the qualification, and the relevance of that will come clear in a moment. So PMI is the world's leading professional association for a growing community of millions of project professionals and change makers worldwide. So PMI has very much extended its reach, its ambition beyond the PM professional into the whole idea of change makers, sometimes called accidental project managers. I know that's a term I've heard quite a bit within the APM. So a little bit more about the Project Management Institute. Project Management Institute exists to empower people to make ideas a reality, and we offer helpful tools to people whose focus is driving change for social good. So again, perhaps a little wider than you might have expected with in terms of project management only. And that's part of our strategy 4.0. A little bit more about the strategy there. The strategy, we talk about having impact and 10x growth. And you can see there are essentially four I'm sorry, on this view, that there are three main strategic ambitions or objectives around what the PMI is about: to broaden our reach, to extend our impact, and then to build lasting relationships. So broaden our reach, extend our impact, and build lasting relationships. And the purpose of the organization lends itself very closely to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I just heard our last speaker talking about SDGs, and I guess they're kind of bread and butter to most people on the call. But in terms of those goals, there is an SDG compact that has been signed by our outgoing president and CEO, Sunil Prashara. And in a commitment under that compact, one of the things that PMI is committed to do is to run a global campaign to contribute more than 200,000 hours by PMI volunteers and other stakeholders in support of the SDGs by 2025. So there is a very clear goal at which we're able to measure against, and a clear purpose, if you like, for volunteers to actually follow. I won't dwell too much on this slide. It's really a segue slide, but it essentially draws you, it provides some information as to our membership. 2,787, it's gone down a little bit since COVID. And then within that, those that hold credentials, and they're getting probably a clicker, but you can see there in terms of those, something like 60%, 1,611, hold the PMP qualification. And there are other credentials on there, but that's quite significant. So people join our organization because they are credentialed in many cases. And if they're credentialed, they then need to sustain professional development. And we organize professional development in terms of what we call our talent triangle. That there's the traditional, perhaps technical project management and leadership. We saw about those that were in leadership, but also strategic and business. And you can see within the triangle, each of those are equal importance, and that those that say hold the PMP credential need to maintain their professional standards, if you like, both in terms of education, but also giving back. And therein is the real interest. And this is often one of the drivers for volunteering with PMI. It's giving back, not simply perhaps book or head knowledge, etc. So, and other credentials will have other requirements, but this is for 60 PDUs over 3 years. So volunteering for the PMI, I've got one eye on the clock, so we'll move through this pretty quickly. What I wanted to do was just kind of take you through a brief journey pre-COVID, January 2020. I was one of 3 volunteers. I wasn't a board member at that time, who were doing our best to run about 1 webinar per month. That's how we were doing, and we bumped along like that, and the numbers were going down. We set our ambition to push things along in terms of our webinars, run them at one a week and sometimes more than that, and to reinvent them, to make them as interactive as possible. As a consequence of that, our numbers have absolutely mushroomed. So when the time that this was put together, there were about 28 members. There's now getting on for 40 that do various things as part of the whole digital events. So you can see people on there. You can see people like Carla, who now works with us from Peru. She was our Volunteer of the Year 2020. And each of these people have different skill sets that they bring to our team. And as a consequence of this growth and improvement in quality, etc., we entered a competition, the Digital Event Awards, and we were delighted to be highly commended within that for our webinar series of 2020. So, you know, we felt that we'd done quite well in terms of building the team. But I guess within that, we perhaps at times have struggled for a purpose, for why are we holding events? We have a pretty good idea as to what we're looking to achieve in terms of each of the events. We have a model of event ROI, but we didn't perhaps have a net zero roadmap. And by a number of things that really came together. So with a speaker, Rob Leslie Carter, in April of this year, we did a soft launch to a conference that we decided we were going to run in conjunction with COP26. So, and there we looked at how PMs can influence sustainable development. And a lot of this information is available on our site, but you can see, you can zoom in on any of these areas that Rob has talked about that really provide some target activities that project managers can take. So that was a useful soft launch for our conference. And our conference itself, if I'm honest, still recovering from it. I was saying to Neil, he's certainly got things sussed with regard to Zoom today. We used a really interesting platform called Hopin that allowed us to have a stage like this, to run sessions, networking events, and an expo. So kind of lots of things going on in our virtual event. But that was really an event that was about moving from the kind of engage and inspire element through to equipping and mobilizing. And we were very keen that people would go from our conference, our stepping stone event, and go and do stuff. And it was for current and for next generation people. So really interesting conference. As I say, perhaps quite hard work to put it together with entirely volunteers, but many of them went above and beyond. So a recent conference. And also Rob Leslie Carter from Arup was one of our speakers. He's a closing keynote. We've been working with him to develop a thought leadership series that really covers the four key themes that have come through in terms of COP26. So we're launching now a series of videos with leads within those teams that we can then use to keep the conversation going. So that's another initiative that's really come out of that. And one of those videos by Rob talks about 5 different things that PM project managers can do. I won't go into each of them. The slides are going to be available afterwards, but you can see there we've got various things. Number 2, perhaps we pick up in terms of collaborating through joint events like this and through our comms activity. So that is amongst the next steps. Those are the kind of things that we're actually doing. If we then just very quickly move into the area of hours for impact. So coming back to this SDGs or this SDG compact that has been signed, we've undertaken within 2021 for volunteers and stakeholders to provide 100,000 hours. That's the target for 2021 to advance SDGs. And there's a video that we could have looked at about that. So within PMI UK, we have done a number of things, and we are doing a number of things around that. We are doing, as you saw, the conference, the thought leadership series, but we're also working with an organization that will be very familiar to most of you within Enactus, in Enactus UK. You can see there they operate within over 65 universities, many students involved in teams, and they've been involved in over 200 social enterprise projects to date. And what we're doing, we're putting in judges to look at a number of their, they run a competition with challenges, and the various teams compete from around the country. They go forward into world championships, and some of our members volunteer in terms of being judges for that. Others volunteer as mentors and coaches to those individual teams, and we're growing that relationship. And it is one way in which our volunteers can give back and use their skills. And you can see there in terms of that, there's the opportunity to make pledges and fulfill those pledges as part of that scheme. So this relates to Enactus and some of our activities that one of our other board members has actually been leading on. Here, again, we won't go into it, but this is effectively the scorecard that PMI is using to judge the way it's actually delivering against its objectives. And if we look in here at the objective expanding our impact, then you can see through stakeholder enablement, we've got the reference here to hours pledged annually in support of the UN SDGs. So let's just think, how are we doing? 100,000 hours currently pledged as of 1st November, 66,000. So we're some way behind, more pledges, more activity to be done, probably a whole lot more recording. And here you've got essentially some of you may be familiar with the standard church roof appeal that we used to see around. There's that figure that is there, that is published on our website. So just short of 70,000 hours on the period. So in summary then, we provide an introduction, a little bit from myself, a little bit from you guys. We looked at the Project Management Institute, what it's all about, how it extends the role, if you like, of PM professional to change makers, and a little bit about its strategy 4.0. I talked about volunteering with PMI through the lens of our digital events team and the journey that we're on. We looked at our developing net zero roadmap that you can see has gained incredible impetus and importance through COP26. We looked at hours for impact, how volunteers can make a difference, and how we're mobilizing volunteers from that 700,000 globally, just under 3,000 volunteers within the, 3,000 members and about 100 volunteers in the UK. And then I thought I'd finish with a quote. So here's my quote. It's from Harold S. Geenan. You can see it, but I'll read it anyway. Words are words, explanations are explanations, promises are promises, but only project performance, I've added project performance, is reality. So I think I'm just about up to time. I may be out of time. There's my contact details. Do please contact me, particularly if you want to know more about the PMI, or if you want to get involved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Merv. Fantastic presentation. And I would also like to second Merv on the new initiatives by PMI, some very interesting events happening almost every week. Is that right, Merv? And
yes, yeah.
Net Zero conference on 20th and 21st of October was a fantastic conference. Very user-friendly system. So I do recommend the PMI digital event series as well. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Merv. I would like to probably open the floor to Steve, and then we have a couple of minutes for a Q&A afterwards. So anyone who wants who has any questions for Merv and Steve as well, when he's done, please put it in the chat box and we'll go through them. Thank you. Over to you, Steve. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. And start sharing my screen, which would be a good idea. And there we go. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to start by saying thank you to Sarah for giving me the privilege of talking to you today, and also to Neil for making everything work. So I took the title of the presentation from a sentence in the original outline for today's event that said, by knowing how to integrate sustainability into all project management practices, projects can make a significant positive difference. So I'd like to explore some of the things that I feel have got in the way of integrating sustainability into our professional practices and how we can overcome those barriers. And I'm going to focus particularly on environmental sustainability. If we're not integrating environmental sustainability into our project management practices, it's not for the lack of good advice. So I'd like to start with a call to action from 2017. The late Professor Peter Morris of UCL published a report in collaboration with the APM called Climate Change and What the Project Management Profession Should Be Doing About It. And the report highlighted that while research on climate change has been led by scientists, that there is a significant role for project delivery professionals in mitigating and adapting to it. And the report also addressed the challenges of putting the required capabilities into place. And those challenges include the strategic issues that need to be addressed by governments, the challenges for organisations, and the challenges facing individual project practitioners. So as we've heard during COP26, governments around the world, including the UK, are at last beginning to fulfil their role in addressing strategic issues around climate change. And by that I mean setting realistic targets on greenhouse gas emissions, providing the funds required to meet them. And much of the work required to meet those targets will be project-based. So last week, the UK's Chancellor announced that most big UK firms and financial institutions will be forced to show how they intend to hit climate change targets. Under the proposed Treasury rules by 2023, they'll have to set out detailed public plans for how they will meet the UK's net zero target. And I think it seems a natural next step that every individual project, public sector and private, will need to develop a plan that demonstrates how it will hit the carbon zero target, or at least be carbon neutral. The good news is that if we ask, as Professor Morris did, what aspects of project management are relevant to dealing with climate change, the answer is virtually all of them. In other words, the principles, the processes, the techniques that make up project management give us, the project management community, a really solid framework to engage with climate change and other aspects of sustainability. So I'm going to look at three of the barriers that I believe have got in the way of embedding sustainability into our practices. I'm going to look at our perceptions of sustainability itself, our perception of the role of project professionals, and finally, I'll have a look at the state of project management education in the UK. So what do I mean by a sustainable project? Well, in some ways, projects are by definition unsustainable. They can't go on forever, and every project has an end date. But to me, sustainability is really about looking at the long-term impact of a project. What happens as a result of the project in the months and years after the project team has delivered the final product and disbanded. The worst thing we can do is rely on labels. And in his speech at COP26 last week, Mark Carney pointed out that worthy sounding labels such as sustainable and green are simply not enough. It's not about style, it's about a relentless focus on establishing and addressing measurable impacts that the project can have on the economy, on the environment, and on people. But we're not just talking about projects that deliver green technology or even major infrastructure projects that clearly have an environmental impact. I believe that every project has the potential to make an impact both positive and negative, on our planet and the people who live on it, as well as the economy. And I think it's important to recognise that an opportunity for one project stakeholder could represent a threat to another. And I would always include the natural environment as a major stakeholder in any project. So traditionally, projects have been good at identifying measurable benefits in terms of financial outcomes. They haven't been as good at identifying social and environmental impacts. And we heard from a couple of the other speakers the idea of the triple bottom line that was developed by John Elkington back in 1997 and finessed by the OECD into the catchier sounding people, planet and prosperity. And that triple bottom line recognises that those three elements are inextricably connected as part of a wider system. I used to tell my students that do nothing should always be an option in a project business case. When it comes to climate change, I think doing nothing is absolutely not an option. So to me, a sustainable project has a sustainable business case, and the role of project sponsors in shaping the definition of a project at the front end is absolutely key. Every project should have a business case that includes environmental and social as well as economic impacts. But it's not just about sponsors. It was interesting that the majority of people in the poll this morning said that they thought organisations were primarily responsible for embedding sustainability into project management. But I believe that project managers and their teams responsible for the implementation and delivery of the project also have a decisive role to play in shaping and directing projects. And that brings me on to the second barrier, our perceptions of the roles of project professionals. I've met far too many project managers who tell me that they're aware their project has a business case, but they've never seen it. They say things like, my role is to deliver X, Y, and Z on time and on budget. But I would argue that the role of the project manager is to deliver X, Y, and Z that are capable of realizing the positive outcomes in the business case and mitigating any negative impacts. And as Professor Morrison pointed out, a project manager's skill set, planning, tracking progress, managing risk, quality change and issues, equips them to do just that. Planning is especially important, and I think a key element of the project manager's role is to create a project plan or project roadmap that demonstrates not just how the project can deliver on time within budget, but also how the positive impacts identified in the business case can be realized and how the negative impacts can be mitigated. But as we've seen, addressing climate change requires more than simply labeling projects as sustainable. The triple bottom line is a good starting point, but it doesn't fully address the challenges and opportunities of embedding the technology and behaviours required to deliver this bottom line. For a start, there's a whole new language to learn. Carbon neutral, net zero carbon, carbon capture, carbon offset, embodied carbon are 5 concepts that are not just blah, 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 but they're important concepts that every member of every project team needs to understand. In the 4 years since Professor Morris's paper was published, there have been huge advantages in many of the technologies required to address climate change. But these bring challenges as well as opportunities, not least the perception that if we're talking green technology, we're talking higher costs. Some technologies are already here, others are in the pipeline, others may not happen. So it's a challenge for project managers. Fortunately, many organisations are establishing sustainable development departments staffed by expert environmental consultants. And project teams need to become as accustomed to seeking the advice of these people as they are asking for help from legal, financial, and procurement departments. And we need to educate ourselves as current practitioners or as new entrants to the profession, which brings me to the third barrier, the state of project management education. Another speaker at COP26, Sir Patrick Vallance, the UK's Chief Scientific Advisor, warned that climate change is potentially a deadlier problem than coronavirus. And he said that combating climate change requires a combination of new technology and behavioural change. Well, I've already touched on technology, but behavioural change also takes time. However, in the UK, the majority of project management education is delivered in the form of intensive 5-day training courses, which lead to some kind of certification. For example, Prince2, Agile PM, the APM's PMQ qualification, and the PMI's PMP qualification. The numbers are huge. More than 1 million people have some kind of Prince2 certificate, and 170,000 people have become certified in Agile PM since it was launched in 2010. Don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking these qualifications. There's a place for all of them as they provide the framework of knowledge and skills that Peter Morris highlighted. But there are two major problems in this approach to learning project management skills when it comes to integrating sustainability. The first is the exam syllabuses for these qualifications I've just listed are based on manuals or bodies of knowledge that barely mention sustainability. Prince2 and Agile PM don't mention it at all, and the APM's current version of its body of knowledge, published only last year, devotes exactly 2 pages to the subject. So I think that the owners of these project management methodologies and bodies of knowledge need to think seriously about embedding sustainability into the next iteration of a manual or body of knowledge. So it's been left to the project education community to address the gap through smarter course design. As a company that aims to design project management courseware that's both engaging and relevant, we've always included real-world case studies in all of our courseware. At the beginning of this year, we took the decision to base all of our case studies on projects with carbon zero targets. This gives learners the opportunity to explore green concepts and technologies in the context of a project management framework. Several universities in the UK are now running degree and postgraduate project management programs, which do provide students with the time to reflect on their learning and develop sustainable values and behaviours. And the 2 project management apprenticeship standards in the UK do the same thing, as they include behaviours in their learning outcomes, as well as skills and knowledge. But a university course is not for everybody, and the numbers of people completing project management apprenticeships are relatively low, partly as a result of cuts to core funding. So if we're going to rely on training programs based on methodologies like Prince2 and Agile, organisations in the project education community need to develop smarter delivery methods, which give learners space to explore the concepts that underpin sustainability, and really importantly, the time to embed them into their practices and behaviours. So I'd like to leave you with a final thought. If you sit, for example, the APM's PMQ exam, you may be asked to differentiate between critical path analysis and critical chain analysis. How about an exam for project managers that asks them to differentiate between carbon neutral, carbon offset, and carbon capture? Well, thank you for listening. Those are my contact details, and if anybody would like to get in touch to explore any of the ideas I've talked about, I'd be really happy to talk to you. Okay, if I need to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Steve, for a very interesting presentation, and also the points about regarding education was personally very interesting for me. There is a debate going on among educators, specifically within project management, that I'm aware of embedding sustainability into the curriculum. And there is an initiative that has started, but obviously it takes time, that as well. I would like to invite Merv to probably elaborate a little bit more on the role of project management bodies, and particularly PMI that you're representing today, because I know the PM book has just come out, a new version. Would you be happy to briefly let us know how sustainability has been addressed, or are there plans from a PMI perspective on how that element is going to be embedded into project management education and trainings?
Yes, so a kind of disclosure to start with, I'm not actually a PMP, or I haven't got my PMI qualification, albeit, you know, there are a lot of sort of micro credentials nowadays, and things like the sort of citizen developer. So I'm certainly going to embark on some of those things. I think really where it's becoming evident that PMI is adapting and becoming a for-purpose organization is through this strategy 4.0. And what it's then really doing is I suppose empowering chapters to come forward with, well, how are they going to make a contribution? And there's lots of guidance coming out from the centre as to how that might be done. But you know, we found it typically, if we get involved with an organisation like Enactus and are able to offer PM skills into that area, that makes a big difference. As I say, that was either things like judging against criteria that will include sustainability, or it's in actually mentoring or coaching groups that, you know, they are often within universities or early in career. And I think, you know, perhaps building on what Steve says, there's just such a range of skills that the PM has at their disposal. And one of the quickie would be the element of the talent triangle that is being developed. You know, at one time and across the profession, it was all about technical project management in critical chain analysis, or critical path, or whatever. Earned value is another challenging one, I think, within the qualifications. But now it's broadened much more into business and strategy, and the project manager is expected to manage up into the business, etc. So a bit of a kind of a range of answers there, Sarah, but I think you know, as an association, it's certainly raised its horizons, its ambitions around what we call making integrated social impact, or 10x impact is another aspect of this.
Right, fantastic. Steve, any comments, any points there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the you know, really good things that the PMI is doing is providing this sort of mentorship. You know, I talked about smarter delivery models for project management training. So I think the idea, instead of putting people in a classroom, whether it's in person or online, for a very intensive 5-day program where there's really little time to reflect on what people are learning, the idea of perhaps spreading the teaching out over a longer period and providing sort of mentoring to go with that. Because I mean, we are looking at, I mean, as a project manager myself, I've had to kind of teach myself the language of sustainability in order to understand that. So we're looking at supporting new entrants to the profession, which I think is really, really important. But also current practitioners need to get their heads around this. So that sort of mentoring support that PMI provide, I think, is a very important model going forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And obviously PMI, they have a curriculum as well, which higher education institutes can use for designing their own courses in project management, courses and modules in project management. And it's actually being, at the moment as we speak, it's being reviewed. And one of the elements that PMI would want to embed into that curriculum is sustainability. So that's another initiative by PMI. It would have been great to have a representative from APM as well, to see what's happening at their side, because APM and PMI are the main, at least as educators, those are the main two professional bodies that we use as references for teaching. Absolutely. It would also be interesting, I think, I would put it in the chat box, what's being done at the moment with regards to sustainability at London South Bank University. John had to leave us, but he's a member of the committee that works with sustainability at LSBU. I'm just wondering, I'm not sure if Simon has been involved in that as well, since that's one of the core of your research. Is there anything you can add to this, Simon? But I'm mindful that there are a few colleagues across LSBU that are members of that panel. Not sure if Simon's online at the moment. Yes.
Yes, I was just trying to get my camera to work, but it says Zoom is unable to detect the camera, but hopefully you can hear me.
Yes, yes.
I'm afraid I'm not in that particular network, so I don't really, I'm not really able to comment on that. Although I know there is a community of people across the university coming together to push towards the sustainability agenda. And yeah, just thinking about some of the earlier comments, I think it will be very useful if sustainability is able to be built into the project management standards to make them more relevant. And I think also, digital transformation would be another one, digital transformation alongside sustainability. I think if that kind of cases and applications and context can be more explicitly woven into project management standards and other related standards, then I think it makes it a lot more relevant and potentially maybe even more exciting to people thinking of moving into the profession as well, because they can see the up-to-date relevance of it and the usefulness of it, rather than having the older existing case studies. Not to criticize project management standards. A number of years ago now, I took the Prince 2 practitioner course and then the MSP practitioner. They probably ran out now. I think they only last 5 years. I did think about doing the third one. I think they called it P30 at the time, the portfolio, but never quite managed to get around to that one.
Right. Yes. That's well, I do teach Prince 2, and at the moment, well, Prince 2 is more of a methodology, but yeah, sustainability is definitely one of the areas that needs to be mentioned there as well. At the moment, it doesn't exist. That's something that we've been discussing as well. Yes, fantastic. I was just looking at the website, at the LSBU's website, and I know I was hoping that John could speak a little bit about that, but there's lots of initiatives happening for reducing carbon emissions. Neil, is there?
Yeah, actually, as someone that is involved in the sustainability steering group, and I'm from a professional services group as well, so it's spreading across our academic schools as well as our professional services group. So you've got our academics in Simon works with a lot of engineering. You've got our School of Built Environment and Architecture, and it's those the typical places that you'd find it. But then you've also got the professional service group. So I work in events in brand and communications, and really embedding it in the work that we do as well. And I've just worked with an organisation called Terra Nutra on a report looking at the carbon footprint of virtual events versus physical events. So it's being woven into how we work as well. And then you've got our estates team, and we've got our estates manager, energy manager Chris Barnes, who recently won a Sibsy award for the amount of work that he's done around reducing LSBU's carbon footprint and his work on emissions and stuff. So it's being woven into the fabric of what LSBU is across the board, and then looking at projects that we can do together. So last year we had a big event series looking at it was a 3-part event series looking at sustainability and climate action across the board, and we had colleagues from LSBU as well as external keynote speakers from Extinction Rebellion through to journalists, Times Higher Education, talking about how we kind of how we work together and link in to kind of like make it a very collaborative, holistic approach. So there's tons being done on sustainability at LSBU. I think when you come to big organizations, it's how that's managed from a big picture perspective that I think sometimes poses, because when so many different people are doing so many different things, it's how you gather that information and have a structured, coordinated approach. And I think that sometimes that's where we struggle. Hope that helps.
Sure, great. And I see that Merv has written that he's interested to know what you're doing with regards to physical versus hybrid, virtual events. So
I'll share that report with you, Merv.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can I just jump in on that one?
Sure.
So I think it has for us been something of a discovery over the last 20 months in terms of just the importance of events in actually kind of getting the message out and driving things forward. And one of the things I'm looking at the moment, and I think you're interested in this, Sarah, is this idea of hybrid events. So we take all the skills that Neil's got and probably the facilities you've got in the university, and then we come in to make sure that we've got an event that satisfies our physical audience, so a local component, and then brings in people from around the world, both in academia, plus within the project management fraternity. And that feels like a winning combination. You know, we'll start in London, but potentially we can roll out elsewhere. But we're really interested in developing that, not just with yourselves, but, you know, we did an event the other day with the University of Westminster. So I'm sure that will be a healthy conversation and we can do some stuff.
Absolutely. We would be very open to that, aren't we, Neil? We would love to work with externals, particularly on this area of sustainability, but also any other areas within the project profession. So that's definitely a yes from our side. We would also love to work across schools. So this event was a great opportunity to link to the School of Engineering, School of Built Environment and Architecture as well. So I hope we can continue this discussion with yourself as well, Simon, and hopefully with John as well. And maybe joint events across schools. I think that's something that we need to do as well, because there are lots of people with common interests, but they rarely get to meet and work together. So that's definitely a way forward if everyone's interested. Sure. Okay, great. I think I would love to just go through the recording once again. There's so much information to absorb and digest, and I'm very thankful, Neil, that you've facilitated that all these events, virtual events, are recorded and provided to the attendees, both attendees and those who, I've got messages from people who said, we would have loved to be able to attend, but unfortunately, because it's, through the weekday and it's in the morning, and November is a very busy month, so they couldn't attend, but we will share the video, the recording with all those who have registered for the event. A high number of registrations we had, and obviously your contact details for all speakers would be shared if you're happy with that, so they can contact you if they need to speak to you or would like to know more about your work. Other than that, I think this was an excellent event. Thank you very much. I personally really enjoyed it. I hope it was the same with the audience as well. We've got a few comments from the audience. So we have Ateka Khan saying, excellent presentation, Steve. Learning zero carbon language is so important, embedding and integrating sustainability. Yes, thank you very much, Tom. Collier says, what is your view? Okay, there's a question for the panelists. What is your view What, in your view, needs to change within the public sector contracting to tackle climate change? It's a very interesting question. Any of the panelists would like to respond to that? Particularly for the public sector, any ideas?
Hi, Tom. It's really good to hear you. Tom was one of my former students a couple of years ago, and I think it's really a combination of bringing these three challenges that Peter Morris highlighted. The sort of impetus from governments, which is finally happening. Organisations are then taking their lead from the government. And this idea that the Chancellor had, which I really hope gets put into practice, of making organisations, public sector and private, really draw up plans to show the impact. And then the third element that we talked about is actually preparing project professionals to give them the tools to actually deliver that, deliver those targets. And as we've seen, all of the frameworks, all the bodies of knowledge, Prince2, PMI, APM, they provide that basic tool set, but it's then integrating it with green concepts and green technologies, and actually cascading it all the way down through the organisation. I don't know if that helps, Tom.
Just going to add, those really good points by Steve, and I think education is important. So just awareness, an improved awareness of sustainability, and professional societies and universities clearly have a role to play there. Government is a major stakeholder in this area, and I suppose thinking on a kind of practical level, the reality on the ground is that often with tenders that are submitted, they closely need to adhere to the specification that's put out by the government agency. So where a government organisation is able to include specific targets, whether it's around the level of embedded carbon, or whether the project is adopting kind of a circular economy approach where materials at the end of the life of the project are reused, recycled, or reapplied. In practical terms, if that is specified in the project requirements, then it's I know it's a little bit blunt, but then suppliers have to deliver against those renewable targets. So although that's a little bit of a blunt measure, but in the context of supporting education and a supporting policy framework, so that people are aware that these things are coming down the pipeline, then I think overall we can move in that direction. But government organizations can, in terms of that specification, because if it's not there, the reality is, and I'm not being overly negative about the commercial sector, but the reality is that often projects are selected on the costs, and there's this term value engineering, which is used, for example, in the built environment, which means sometimes specifications are are taken off in order to save money. So if they're not there, then a lot of the time, unfortunately, the renewable and the kind of the sustainability dimension may not make it onto the provided solution. Although I realize a lot of industry is acutely aware of the need to become more sustainable, but we have the realities on the ground of winning tenders or winning projects from a financial perspective.
Sure, absolutely. That's an excellent point, Simon. I was just thinking that in the poll that we had in the beginning, we asked if the responsibility should be a project level, organization level, or sector level. And probably there's another level at policymakers and like regulators and probably governments, basically, that need to be, especially when it comes to public project, large public projects. That's the role of that even goes to the higher level.
Sure.
Yeah. Any ideas on this, Steve, Merv?
No, I think it is a really important point that Simon's just made, and it's interesting looking. I mean, we saw during the the pandemic, there were some very successful projects and some not so successful. And it's really interesting looking at the different government departments. The ones that really deliver successful projects manage their suppliers. And so it's very much a team working collaboration to deliver the project. The ones that are less successful hand a project over to their suppliers, stand back and just blame them when it goes wrong. And I think, you know, sustainability targets needs to be part of the whole project team, and I would include suppliers in that. So yeah.
Sure, spot on.
Just on that, Steve, yeah, certainly that relationship thing is all important. You know, there is a little bit of work with the Institute of Collaborative Working, the ICW, and ISO standard 44001, so the standard for collaborative working. And you know, that kind of architecture, I think, is really useful for these kind of deeper relationships, as opposed to, you know, ones that are purely transactional. The other thing I would say around sort of government projects is that there have been so many failed projects. You can read the literature, you still see the reports from the Public Accounts Committee and from the NAO. It feels as though we're just not learning. So we've poured huge amounts of money down the drain. And, you know, despite all these reports, we still make the same mistakes time and again, despite, you know, the annual activities of the Infrastructure and Projects Authority. Then, you know, you look at their annual report for the government major project portfolio, and there's some horror stories in there. So some of this is deeply embedded in human nature, but this inability to learn. And just one other element of that is to pass on things like data from one project to another. There's some good work going on now around project data analytics and a new project data analytics task force. But each of the government departments, each of these organizations tend to be data silos, data islands. And a lot of that is what's needed to really make the difference. You know, I'm not convinced a sustainability project is any different to another project, but, you know, a lot of these will be driven by the way in which there are available data.
Sure. That's very interesting. Any comments on those?
Just thinking about the application of the built environment and the infrastructure sector. So for a number of years, we've had the BIM, the building information modeling approach, starting off with, you know, 2-dimensional, moving into 3-dimensional and increasingly sophisticated technologies there. And then we've also got the context of, it's a little bit of a buzzword, but the industry 4.0 and the suite of technologies that come with that, whether it's the industrial Internet of Things, embedded sensors, the large amount of data that can be enabled through that, the big data provision and artificial intelligence. There's a whole raft of technologies. Some of them may make a larger impact compared to others, but nevertheless, I think I personally think that we are in the midst of that fourth industrial revolution. So we do have a rollout of a lot more digital technologies, and why can't we utilize those digital technologies then? Yes, to improve the efficiency and productivity of organizations, but harness them as well to improve the sustainability and sustainable outcomes. And so in that chart the model that I put up from the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, they mentioned the digital twins. And that's a particularly interesting technology area where it's moving beyond just having a simulation model, but to have a real-time digital representation of an asset, and then to have a two-way data flow between the digital representation and the physical asset. So you have real-time optimization and delivery of the project or the infrastructure. So I think absolutely there are challenges in terms of historical performance of projects and those kind of big ticket, high level projects that we all know about in the past that have failed. But equally, there's a lot of opportunities in harnessing digital technologies, increasing awareness of sustainability as well. And people working in projects, I think, it definitely can be at the kind of vanguard of a lot of these, tackling the challenges and the opportunities. Because as we know, I think you said at the very beginning, Sarah, the project culture is pervasive in many organizations. A lot of what organizations do now is often delivered through projects. Yeah, a lot of opportunity there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And while Merv was speaking, it kind of made me think about a link that I received a few days ago from a former colleague in the construction sector, that there were a number of kind of UK projects, I put the link in the chat box as well, have been mentioned in COP26 as good examples of embedding sustainability. But I just, following on what you said, Merv, probably the fact that there's so few of them that are being mentioned, it means that there are lots of obviously challenges with other projects, because it is on the agenda, but whether that's actually being put into practice, that's something that needs lots of, I would probably think, time.
Yeah.
But some would say maybe cost as well, because it's a costly process, if I'm not mistaken. I would like to know your ideas on those. Would investment in itself be able to help us move towards that direction in the project profession? Is it the case of lack of enough money, especially in the construction sector with a very low margin? Or is it the mindset?
I'm going to say both. Maybe that's a cop-out, but I started thinking about when we were doing our conference, for the Net Zero conference. Initially we had a fairly narrow focus around energy transition, and we ended up, because of COP26, looking at and working with a lot of organisations that are in Scotland. And there's some that are really very advanced up there in this. But there was an organisation called Fuel Change, which is a bit like a mini Enactus, but they take groups of young people, early in career professionals, apprentices, etc., put them together to tackle challenges that are offered up through local businesses and communities, etc. Once these challenges have been tackled, or have been, they've got some sort of blueprint or something, a working model, then it's up to those companies to come in and invest further to help deliver them at scale and pace. And a lot of what I think the profession offers, and is absolutely for now, is to deliver at scale and pace, not kind of gold plate anything or whatever, just get it done and use those skills that we've got. The whole fail fast thing as well. We've only got a few years before we hit that tipping point. So, and the other thing is perhaps a level of urgency about this that just doesn't exist at the moment, I don't think, within the profession. Absolutely.
So creating that urgency is also another kind of action that needs to be done across sectors. And I'm not sure if I think infrastructure and construction is the one that needs it the most. It's because my research is within this industry in particular. So I don't know how it is within the IT sector. Is it still the same? The urgency is the same, and the kind of the, let's say, the downfalls of not having sustainability in place is at the same scale, or is it the infrastructure and construction that calls for more urgent actions? Any ideas on that, Simon? Because your research is also within infrastructure.
Yeah, so I suppose, well, because of the level of investment that goes into infrastructure, and then the direct impact that infrastructure can have in terms of sustainability. So one of the large drivers for CO2 emissions, for example, is cement production.
Yes.
So the very act of actually putting concrete in place and buildings themselves generate CO2, and then you have the operations of the building, the ongoing operations. So they have a direct and indirect as well impact on emissions and sustainability. But maybe if we think about telecommunications projects or others, you know, there can still be other SDGs that they would impact. So maybe it's not so much the renewable energy and the environment. It could be SDGs around education or around equality. So they could still have an impact, but the SDGs would be tuned according to maybe the context of the project and the stakeholders. So if we took a telecommunications project, is there a particular issue within that telecommunications sector of that country around the level of ethnic diversity or of representation within that sector? Are we seeing still a higher level of male people working in that sector? So even with the telecoms project, it could be possible then to track outcomes in terms of enhancing or gender balance and ethnic diversity as well. But it would be a different set, maybe, and that's maybe the way it should be anyway, going back to the concept of prioritizing sustainability outcomes and the SDG subset for the circumstances, the contingency nature of projects as well.
Sure, absolutely. That's an excellent point, Simon. And I think it is a common understanding probably that, you know, when we talk about sustainability, the first thing that comes to mind and probably the prioritization at the moment is more on environmental sustainability, while there are 16 other focus areas and, poverty, equality, gender equality, all the other elements that economics sustainability that need the same amount of attention. So absolutely, I do agree very much that probably in different sectors there might be different challenges within those 17 areas.
Sure, and just I was just briefly going to add as well, one example of a good example of a project which is generating sustainability outcomes is the Thames Tideway project, the super sewer under London, and they do a lot of work to very clearly demonstrate how they are impacting the SDGs across the board, whether it is the environmental side or indeed the other areas around diversity and other issues. And I know that it was mandated by the government when they have that project. It's a multi-billion-pound project, but nevertheless, if you go to their website, and we've had interactions with them, they're doing a lot of great work to generate and sustain the sustainability outcomes across the board.
Sure.
So, sorry, Steve was going to say something.
Yes.
I was just going to say on this kind of social sustainability, because I really focused on climate change and environmental, and tried to make the point that project managers are used to working with finance departments to make sure that investment appraisal is done. They're used to working with legal and procurement and health and safety people to make sure that the administrative pillar of sustainability, that they're complying with the law. What they're not used to doing is talking to environmental experts, and they're not used to talking to HR departments about the diversity aspects of it. So project managers and project professionals generally need to start looking outwards more, I think, and seeking that specialist advice.
Great. So I know that Neil is keeping the time. Neil, I know we're probably near the intended
We are, and we're actually we have a virtual networking lunch, which those of you who are still here we're very welcome to drop into. So I will that link has been emailed to you, and I've also popped that in the chat box as well. So that will start at 12:30. So we'll give people some time just to grab some lunch and then reconvene on that other Zoom link there. But that's all from me. I'll hand over to you for closing words.
Sure. Thank you very much, all of you, all the attendees and our excellent speakers today. This was a very thought-provoking event with lots of interesting presentations and views that needs time to digest and reflect on. So I hope that at some other point we can continue this discussion. We can continue having events such as this in collaboration with PMI, School of Engineering, involving yourself, Steve, as well. I look forward to seeing you sometime soon in person. Any comments? Yes.
Just to say thanks, Sarah and Neil, for organising the event. Really appreciated it and enjoyed speaking at the event this morning. And yes, hopefully we can have face-to-face or even hybrid events in the future. Yep, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and it's been great. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
Okay.
Thank you, Simon. Have a lovely rest of the day.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.